So I get to answer your question. Stay tuned.
Can you feel the excitement, America? President Biden teasing that you'll know, quote, real soon about his 2024 plans, even though he's completely bombing in the polls. The big guy is expected to officially kick off his bid for re-election tomorrow with a low-key video announcement. He apparently filmed it at his beach house after getting back from his Ireland trip. And while Biden pushes ahead, more than half the country is saying no thanks. A whopping 70% say Biden should not run again. And even the media has serious doubts about Joe.
Do the American people want that? Do they want 4 more years for this president?
My own sense is that most Americans don't want to vote for an 81-year-old man for president.
The Democrats are the ones that I really worry about right now. They have got to get on it, what their message is going to be and what they're going to do to build the enthusiasm for their candidate.
The president is facing serious headwinds when it comes to the public perception about whether or not he should run. And chief among those concerns are the president's 80-year-old age.
There's a majority of Democrats who don't want to see Biden run again. It's not because of his policies. It's simply because of questions about his physical ability to do it and his current age.
And while Americans have worries about a second Biden term, top Democrats are trying to reassure them.
He is going to have an incredibly strong record to run on.
Should President Biden be doing more to show Americans that he's up to the job?
I think his schedule reflects an active person, mentally and physically, who is engaging with the American people on a regular basis. It's about 19 months before there's an election. Most people make their decision on the candidate 19 days before the election. So we're far in advance of any decision making.
Okay, Greg, I'm going to start with you. All right. So what we've got is the media's questioning Biden. 70% of Americans don't want him to run. And the truth is that when everyone is starting to question him, including the Democrat media or the mainstream media, it's not a good sign for this guy.
It's a pretty staggering number. I mean, it's hard to get 70% of anybody to believe in one thing. It's hard to get 70%, I mean, to agree what a woman is. What about the remaining 30%? I mean, can you do polling in psychiatric hospitals? Whenever they describe somebody as active, that means they're really old, right? Oh, he's so active. Yeah. It's like a 13-year-old dog trying to go up the stairs. But it is kind of funny when you think about Joe. We were having this conversation in 2019, and everybody said he was already past his prime. Shout out to Don Lemon. But who would think we would have the same? I know, big media news today, huh?
Yeah, no, keep talking.
Don Lemon, wow.
Keep talking.
Who would have seen that coming? Anyway, but we're having the same conversation again at 2024. You know, for 2020, it's like booking a second trip on the Titanic. And now we're in this era of deep fakes and artificial intelligence, and where you're going to have a video tomorrow. I mean, he's going to be as real as Max Headroom. You're going to be seen moving around like this. There'll be clips, there'll be edits, because you can't just run it, because it's not going to work. In his defense, because Harold is here, and he needs all the help he can get. The generic candidate always does better, right? Because the unknown is always preferable to the familiar. You know, every time we fall in love, it's before familiarity kicks in, and you have this person that you admire and you love, and then over time, you know, you start to get tired of them, and it may not be their fault, but, you know, maybe it's because you're tired of hearing the same thing, or maybe they piss you off, and then sooner or later, then it's just over, and then everybody's shocked.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Dana, the Wall Street Journal says that Biden is being selfish by saying that he's the only guy for the job and possibly leaving us stuck with Kamala Harris. And especially now with the fact that it appears that this campaign, whenever it gets started, is going to be a very low-key campaign with a low-key announcement.
So do you guys remember in one of the first Democratic primary debates back in 2019, it was one of the Castro brothers that was running for president, and on stage during the debate, he brought up cognitive decline.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And he was almost run out of town. He basically dropped out a day or two later because everyone said, you can't say that. Well, now the New York Times editorial page is actually saying that. I'm not saying to drop out, but they are saying there is an issue here, and they're saying the president needs to address it. I remember when President Trump took office the first day, he announced that day that he would be running for re-election. So there was never any question. What Biden has done for the past 18 months is let everybody wonder, will he run again? I think something that happened in the midterms, when the Democrats did better than expected, it sort of saddled the Democrats with Biden. Because now he doesn't think that he's old. Okay, and I think that it's hard to tell somebody that. And he has his family around him saying, "It's all you're good. We're good to go." And you've accomplished so much. You have to finish the job. And he believes that, and they're going to keep on trying to push for that. I do think that they've been pretty open about the fact that Joe Biden, they think in their mind, is the only Democrat that can beat President Trump in a rematch. I don't know if that's true, but I do think the last thing I would say is what you mentioned about the Wall Street Journal editorial board, that if the question gets to be, well, if Biden's in cognitive decline of some rate and Kamala Harris is the option, then does that motivate Republicans to vote more as Democrats are less enthusiastic, in which case, as Kellyanne Conway said on the Big Show over the weekend, that actually could help Republicans, no matter who it is.
Great point. All right, I'm going to go to you now, Harold. You know, he says he needs to finish the job, as Dana just mentioned, and he can tout all the great things that he's done, like massive new infrastructure. The president is doing his job well. Apparently, they say that the economy is humming and that there are so many jobs available. Do you think that's selling? The American people are buying it?
Well, first it's good to be back with you around the table. You as well, Greg, as always. I'd say a couple things. The country's divided. There seems to be little enthusiasm for either of the front runners. I'm 52. I don't recall a time when 70% of the country doesn't want the incumbent president to run, and 60% of the country doesn't want the front runner in the Republican Party to be the nominee. There seems to be age as the primary factor with President Biden, and perhaps some of the noise around former President Trump is a reason for that, wherever you may stand in the race. Two, Ron DeSantis was leading in some polling a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. To Greg's point, I think generic polling, everybody thinks that you can have better and do better, and we believe that we can have someone personify better what we want in politics if we don't know a name. I do believe that if the two of them are the nominees, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I hope they don't do what some think, and I think they do very well, which is bring out the very worst in their supporters, and I think bring out the worst sometimes in the country, whether they intend to or not. I hope that they understand they need to elevate the campaign. I said before, and I got criticized a little bit on the panel and perhaps some of our viewers, I think choice for Democrats is an incredibly important issue. It continues to perform well on the ballot, and I think even if it's Joe Biden or someone else, that issue will be a defining issue for Democrats going forward, regardless if it's a governor that we don't know of.
Partly because there's going to be state referendums in the key states, like in Ohio, for example, unless the Republicans can block that.
Well, there's no doubt. But when in 2006, I ran for Senate, Republicans, led by some in the White House that you served in, Dana, put same-sex marriage referendums on the ballot, all in an effort to try to generate support. So these are time-honored traditions of doing this. And it will, I think, whatever the case, it will benefit Democrats. But there's no doubt, we've never seen a moment where 70% of the same party doesn't want their incumbent to, or the country doesn't want that person to run, and 60% doesn't want the other side to run. We'll see how this plays out.
You know, it's interesting. When the Democrats start pushing, they say that, you know, and I was reading this afternoon, he can appear above the fray if he delays the announcement. And they said he had a daring voyage into Kiev. He was greeted like a hero in his motherland, Ireland. First of all, a daring voyage into Kiev when they had those fake sirens and nobody even looked to see if there were any bombs coming. I mean, how much can you gaslight?
Well, look, you can't go overseas and then not go to East Palestine. People pay attention to those types of things, you know. I was actually there over the weekend, and why didn't they go visit those people? Those people vote, they care, they're Americans. Look, cognitive decline is palpable. I mean, everybody notices it. And if the Democrats think that more cowbell, more Joe Biden is actually going to solve their problems, that's not going to solve their problems. They're on the wrong side of the issues. They got somebody who can't speak. And I don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, that Susan Rice departed 24 hours before Joe Biden. I wouldn't be surprised.
What does that tell you?
Because I think she actually might be a candidate. I don't think Joe Biden, even though he may announce tomorrow, I don't think by the time you get to the end of the year, he's actually going to run. And when they switch the calendar, so South Carolina goes before Iowa and all this, That was a move by the Congressional Black Caucus, and I think somebody like Susan Rice, who's got strong credentials with Obama and with Biden, looks at that and says, why aren't I the president?
Wait, do you
She
think
might
that
run.
Susan Rice is going to take on Kamala Harris for the nomination?
I think there is a chance.
I'll
of that,
watch
yeah.
it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.